Millionaire CEO didn't know he had a daughter until she said at the funeral, "Daddy, Mum's gone. Now it's just us two." Before anything else, if you're watching this from a place of struggle, know that you're not alone. Drop a heart below. The rain fell in gentle waves, matching the tears that streamed down Jack Harrison's face. At 42, he'd never imagined standing here, watching his wife's casket being lowered into the cold, unforgiving ground. Elizabeth Harrison, gone at 38 in a senseless car accident. 1 week. That's all it had taken for his perfect life to shatter. "Mr. Harrison," his assistant Megan approached cautiously. "The car is ready whenever you are." Jack nodded, unable to form words. The mourners had begun to disperse, black umbrellas bobbing like crows taking flight. He'd heard their whispers. Poor Jack. So successful yet so unlucky in love. Finally found happiness only to lose it so quickly. 2 years, that's all he'd had with Elizabeth. 2 perfect years that now felt like a cruel joke from the universe. "I should thank everyone for coming," he managed, straightening his shoulders. "They'll understand if you don't," Megan replied softly. He shook his head. "Elizabeth would want me to." The thought of his wife's gracious smile gave him strength to move toward the gathering of mourners. That's when he saw her, a small figure in a black dress that was slightly too big, standing beneath a tree at the edge of the cemetery. A little girl, with honey-blonde hair falling in soft waves past her shoulders. She was staring directly at him, with piercing blue eyes that seemed oddly familiar. As Jack approached the remaining guests, the child stepped forward, walking with determined steps toward him. Something about her posture, the set of her chin, it made him pause. "Mr. Harrison, my deepest condolences," someone was saying, but Jack's attention remained fixed on the approaching child. She stopped directly in front of him, looking up with those unsettlingly familiar eyes. An elderly woman several paces behind called out, "Sophie, wait!" But the girl didn't wait. With a voice clear as a bell, she said, "Papai, a mamãe acabou de morrer. Agora somos nós dois." Jack's Portuguese was rusty from business trips to Brazil, but he understood enough. "Daddy, Mommy just died. Now it's just us two." The world tilted sideways. "I'm sorry, what did you say?" he asked, his voice barely audible. "Mommy said you speak English better." The girl switched languages effortlessly. "My mom died 2 weeks ago. She made me memorize your name and face from pictures. She said when she was gone I needed to find you because you're my daddy." Jack felt the blood drain from his face. "There must be some mistake. I don't have a daughter." "Sophie!" The elderly woman finally caught up, out of breath. "I'm so sorry, Mr. Harrison. This isn't how we planned to tell you." "Tell me what?" Jack's voice had turned to ice. The woman placed protective hands on the girl's shoulders. "My name is Martha Miller. Rebecca was my daughter. This is Sophie, Rebecca's child." She paused, meeting his gaze steadily. "And yours?" "That's impossible," Jack whispered, even as his mind raced back 9 years to dark eyes and laughter, to passionate nights with a woman named Rebecca during his company's expansion to São Paulo. "I have papers," Martha said quietly. "And as you can see, she has your eyes." Looking down at Sophie, Jack felt the ground shift beneath him, the same piercing blue eyes that stared back at him from his mirror every morning. "Rebecca died of cancer 2 weeks ago," Martha continued. Her last wish was for Sophie to know her father. The little girl's voice cut through his shock. "Mommy said you didn't know about me, but that you would have loved me if you did." Her chin trembled slightly. Was she wrong? Jack's hands trembled as he stared at the stack of documents Martha had provided. Birth certificate, medical records, photographs, all telling a story he'd never known was being written. "I need a moment," he managed, stepping into his home office and closing the door. He leaned against it, legs threatening to give way. 9 years ago. Brazil, his company's first international expansion. He'd been 33, ambitious, unstoppable. And then there was Rebecca Miller, the brilliant translator with dark curls and a laugh that made his heart skip. Their 3-month affair had been intense, passionate, and according to his plans, temporary. It was never supposed to be serious, he whispered to himself, remembering their goodbye at the airport. He'd given her his private number, promised to stay in touch, but within weeks he'd changed phones, numbers, plunged himself into work as he always did, and apparently missed dozens of her increasingly desperate attempts to reach him. A soft knock interrupted his thoughts. "Jack?" It was his sister Claire. "Are you okay? I just met the girl." "Sophie." He opened the door, face ashen. "Did you know about Rebecca? About any of this?" Claire shook her head, her expression gentle. "How could I? But Jack, she looks just like you, those eyes, that stubborn chin." Jack sank into his chair. "What am I supposed to do, Claire? Elizabeth is barely in the ground, and suddenly I have an 8-year-old daughter." "First, you confirm she's really yours," Claire said practically. "Then, one step at a time. One DNA test, and 48 agonizing hours later, Jack sat in his living room, staring at results that confirmed what those blue eyes had already told him. Sophie Miller was, without question, his biological daughter. Martha sat across from him, hands folded primly in her lap. Sophie was in the garden with Claire, giving the adults time to talk. "Why didn't she try harder to find me?" Jack asked, his voice hollow. Martha's eyes flashed with momentary anger. "She tried for months. Called, emailed, even went to your company's Brazilian office. Your assistant at the time said you were not to be disturbed with personal matters." Jack winced, remembering his instructions during that period. He'd been negotiating 3 major deals simultaneously. "Eventually, Rebecca accepted that you'd moved on," Martha continued. "She decided to raise Sophie alone, rather than force a child on a man who clearly didn't want complications." "I would have taken responsibility," Jack said, the words sounding hollow even to himself. Martha's expression softened slightly. "Perhaps, but Rebecca was proud. Once she decided you didn't want to be found, she focused entirely on giving Sophie a good life." "And now?" Jack asked. "Now Rebecca is gone," Martha said simply, "and her last wish was for Sophie to know her father." Jack ran a hand through his hair. "I don't know the first thing about being a father." "Neither does any first-time parent," Martha replied. "The difference is most get to start with infants, not 8-year-olds. Outside, Sophie's laughter floated through the window as Claire showed her how to make a daisy chain. The sound pierced Jack's heart with unexpected sharpness. "She's already lost her mother," Martha said quietly. "She doesn't need to lose the chance to know her father, too." Jack watched his daughter, through the window, her small fingers working determinedly on the flowers. "I need time to process this." "Time is one luxury Sophie doesn't have much of," Martha replied. "She's already grieving her mother. Every day of uncertainty about her future is another burden." Jack turned to Martha, suddenly realizing something. "Where is she staying now?" "With me in my apartment downtown. It's temporary. My building doesn't allow children long-term." Jack made a decision. "Bring her things here tomorrow. She can stay in the guest room while we figure this out." Martha's eyes widened. "Are you sure?" No, he wasn't sure of anything except that somewhere in Brazil, a woman he once knew had died believing he'd abandoned her and their child. He couldn't change that past, but perhaps he could do something about the future. "It's what Elizabeth would want," he said, surprising himself with the truth of it. His kind-hearted wife would never turn away a child in need, especially not his own. As the words left his mouth, Jack felt a strange peace settle over him, as if Elizabeth were somehow guiding him through this impossible situation. It was the first moment since her death that the crushing weight of grief had lifted, even slightly. "All right then," Martha nodded, watching him closely. Tomorrow it is. The guest room looked like something from a luxury hotel, pristine, elegant, and utterly impersonal. Jack stood in the doorway, suddenly seeing it through new eyes. No child should sleep in a room this sterile. Will this work for Sophie? He asked Martha, who was inspecting the space with a critical eye. It's bigger than our entire apartment, Martha replied, but it needs something, childlike. Jack nodded, making a mental note to have Megan order appropriate bedding, perhaps some toys. What did 8-year-old girls like these days? The sound of small footsteps approached, and Sophie appeared beside him, clutching a worn, stuffed rabbit. "Is this my room?" she asked, her voice small but not fearful. "Yes," Jack answered. "Is it okay? We can change things if you'd like." Sophie stepped inside, taking in the king-sized bed, the abstract artwork, the gleaming surfaces. "It's very clean," she finally said, which wasn't exactly a ringing endorsement. "We'll make it more comfortable," Jack promised. "More. More like home," Sophie supplied, a shadow crossing her face. Home. The word hung in the air between them, loaded with meaning. Her home was gone, along with her mother. His home felt like an empty shell without Elizabeth. Martha broke the tension. "Sophie, why don't you show your father what you brought from our apartment?" Sophie nodded solemnly and opened her small suitcase. From inside, she carefully removed a photo album bound in faded blue fabric. "Mommy made this for me to remember her," she explained, sitting cross-legged on the plush carpet. Jack lowered himself awkwardly to sit beside her, his tailored suit pants not designed for floor sitting. Sophie opened the album to reveal pages of photographs. Rebecca with baby Sophie, toddler Sophie at the beach, Sophie blowing out birthday candles. "This is from my 5th birthday," Sophie pointed. "Mommy made a cake shaped like a butterfly." Jack studied the image of Rebecca, her dark hair shorter than he remembered, her smile radiant as she watched her daughter, their daughter. In the background of one photo, he noticed a framed picture on a shelf, him and Rebecca in Sao Paulo, outside the cafe where they'd first met. "She kept this?" he asked, pointing. Sophie nodded. "Mommy said that was a very happy day. She told me stories about you." "What kind of stories?" Jack asked, throat tight. "Good ones," Sophie said simply. "She said you were smart and worked very hard, and that you made her laugh." Jack felt something crack inside his chest. While he'd been building his empire, barely remembering the translator from Brazil, Rebecca had been painting him as some kind of hero to their daughter. "Your mother was an extraordinary woman," he managed. Sophie turned the page to reveal more recent photos. Rebecca looking thinner, her skin paler, but her smile unwavering as she posed with Sophie at school events, holidays, everyday moments. "When did she get sick?" Jack asked Martha quietly. "The diagnosis came 3 months ago," Martha replied. "By then it was already advanced. She declined quickly." In the final photos, Rebecca was clearly ill, her vibrant presence diminished, yet in every image she was focused entirely on Sophie, as if trying to pour all her remaining love into their final moments together. "This was the last picture," Sophie said, pointing to a photo taken from a hospital bed. Rebecca holding Sophie close, both of them smiling despite the evident pain in Rebecca's eyes. It was 2 days before she went to heaven. Jack felt tears threatening and blinked them back. "She loved you very much." Sophie nodded, tracing her mother's face with a small finger. "She made me practice what to say to you." "We practiced every day when she was in the hospital. What you said at the cemetery." Sophie nodded. "I was supposed to wait until after the funeral, but when I saw you looking so sad..." She trailed off. "I thought maybe you needed me too." The simple words landed like a physical blow. Jack looked at this small person, half him, half Rebecca, who had lost everything yet still had room in her heart to worry about his pain. "I'm glad you didn't wait," he said softly. Later that night, after Sophie had finally fallen asleep in the too-big bed, Jack sat in his office staring at his phone. On impulse, he dialed a number he rarely used. "Hello?" his sister Claire answered, sounding surprised. "I don't know how to do this," Jack admitted without preamble. "Do what?" "Be a father, especially to a child who's just lost her mother." Claire was silent for a moment. "You don't have to know, you just have to try." "What if I make it worse?" The question revealed his deepest fear. "What if I'm not what she needs?" "You're exactly what she needs, Jack. You're her father." Claire's voice softened. "And maybe she's exactly what you need too." Jack stared at the spreadsheet on his computer screen, the numbers blurring together. 3 days since Sophie had moved in, and he'd barely managed 2 hours of productive work. His mind kept drifting to the small girl who was currently sitting in his kitchen with Mrs. Reynolds, the housekeeper, learning to make cookies. The intercom buzzed. "Mr. Harrison?" Megan's voice came through. "The board is asking about tomorrow's presentation." Jack rubbed his temples. "Tell them I'll email it tonight." "And the Peterson account? They've called twice today." "Reschedule," Jack decided. "Next week sometime." A pause. "Are you sure? You've been trying to land Peterson for months." Jack glanced at the photograph now sitting on his desk, Sophie at her last birthday, her smile revealing a missing front tooth. "I'm sure. Something more important has come up." The sound of laughter floated down the hallway, Sophie's high, clear giggle followed by Mrs. Reynolds's warm chuckle. Jack found himself drawn toward the sound, abandoning his desk for the kitchen. The scene that greeted him was one of delightful chaos. Flour dusted every surface, chocolate smears decorated Sophie's cheeks, and the air smelled of vanilla and sugar. "Mr. Harrison!" Mrs. Reynolds looked mortified. "We'll clean everything up, I promise." "Dad!" Sophie called out, using the term for the first time. It stopped Jack in his tracks. "We're making chocolate chip cookies, Mummy's special recipe." Jack approached, oddly moved by the simple domestic scene. "They smell delicious." "You can have one when they're done," Sophie offered magnanimously, "but only one before dinner. That's the rule." "Your rule?" Jack asked, smiling despite himself. "Mommy's rule," Sophie corrected, a flicker of sadness crossing her features before she brightened again. "Do you want to help? You can roll the dough into balls." Jack glanced at his watch. The Peterson presentation, quarterly reports, 3 conference calls he should return. "I'd love to," he heard himself say, rolling up his sleeves. Mrs. Reynolds looked stunned but quickly recovered, handing him a spoon. "Just scoop about this much, roll it in your palms, then place it on the sheet." Jack Harrison, CEO of Harrison Technologies, whose decisions affected markets and whose schedule was booked months in advance, stood in his kitchen rolling cookie dough into imperfect spheres, while his daughter critiqued his technique. "Not so big," Sophie instructed. "They'll spread out when they bake." "Like this?" Jack adjusted. "Better." She nodded approvingly. As they worked side by side, Jack found himself studying her profile, the determined set of her mouth as she concentrated, the way she tucked her hair behind her ear, just as he did when focused. How had a piece of him been walking around in the world for 8 years without his knowledge? "Did your mom teach you to bake?" he asked. Sophie nodded. "She said everybody should know how to make at least one thing really well. Cookies were our special thing." "What else did you and your mom like to do together?" Sophie thought for a moment, rolling another perfect ball of dough. "Reading stories, going to the park. Oh, and watching old movies. Mommy loved old movies with dancing." Jack smiled, remembering how Rebecca had dragged him to a revival showing of Singin' in the Rain during their brief time together. "I remember she liked Gene Kelly." Sophie's eyes widened. "You remember things about Mommy?" Jack nodded, feeling guilty for how few memories he actually had. "Some things. She had a beautiful laugh." "Like bells," Sophie agreed. That's what Grandma Martha always says. The first batch of cookies emerged from the oven, golden and perfect. Sophie insisted Jack try one immediately, watching his face expectantly as he bit into the warm cookie. "This," he announced after swallowing, "is the best cookie I've ever tasted." Sophie beamed, pride radiating from her entire being. Mommy's secret is using 2 kinds of chocolate chips and a little bit of cinnamon. Something tightened in Jack's chest. Rebecca had been teaching their daughter, loving her, sharing wisdom and secrets, while he'd been completely unaware of her existence. The weight of everything Sophie had lost hit him anew. That night, Jack tucked Sophie into bed, an awkward but earnest attempt at establishing a bedtime routine. "Would you like me to read you a story?" he offered, eyeing the books Megan had ordered. Sophie shook her head, clutching her stuffed rabbit. "Can you just sit with me for a little while? Sometimes I get scared in new places." Jack sat carefully on the edge of the bed. "What scares you?" Sophie looked down, fidgeting with her rabbit's ear. "I dream that I'm calling for Mommy, and she can't hear me." Jack felt utterly helpless in the face of her grief. "That sounds frightening." "Grandma Martha says Mommy can always hear me, even in heaven," Sophie continued. "Do you think that's true?" Jack, who hadn't set foot in a church since his own mother's funeral 20 years ago, found himself nodding. "I think your mother will always be with you, Sophie. People we love. They stay with us, even when they're gone." Sophie studied him with those perceptive blue eyes, his eyes. "Are you sad about your wife? The pretty lady in the pictures downstairs?" "Elizabeth," Jack supplied. "Yes, I'm very sad. She was very special." "Was she going to be my stepmother?" The question caught Jack off guard. She didn't know about you. Nobody did." "Oh!" Sophie processed this. "Would she have liked me?" She would have loved you," Jack said with absolute certainty. "Elizabeth had the biggest heart of anyone I've ever known." Sophie seemed satisfied with this answer. She settled deeper under the covers, yawning. "Daddy?" The word still startled him. "Yes? I'm sorry you're sad too." Jack felt something break and mend simultaneously in his chest. He reached out tentatively and smoothed her hair. "Thank you, Sophie. Having you here. It helps." He sat with her until her breathing deepened into sleep, watching the rise and fall of her small chest, marveling at the miracle and mystery of this child who was suddenly his responsibility. Later, alone in his study with a glass of scotch, Jack finally allowed himself to weep for Elizabeth, for Rebecca, for the years lost with his daughter, and for the overwhelming task ahead. "Uncle Jack!" 5-year-old Emma launched herself at Jack as Claire and her husband David arrived for Sunday lunch. "You promised to show me your new robot thingy." Jack caught his niece, swinging her up into a hug. "And I will, Squirt, but first there's someone I'd like you to meet." He set Emma down and beckoned to Sophie, who was hovering uncertainly in the doorway. "Emma, this is Sophie. Sophie, this is my niece, Emma." The two girls studied each other with the frank curiosity of children. Emma broke the silence first. "You have eyes like Uncle Jack." Sophie nodded. "He's my dad." Emma's mouth formed a perfect O. "For real? Like, for always?" "For always," Jack confirmed, sharing a look with Claire over the girls' heads. Emma digested this information, then grabbed Sophie's hand. "Do you like unicorns? I have unicorn stickers in my backpack." Just like that, the ice was broken. The girls disappeared into the living room while the adults moved to the kitchen, where Mrs. Reynolds was preparing lunch. "She's settling in?" Claire asked, accepting the glass of wine Jack offered. "As well as can be expected," Jack replied. "She has nightmares. She gets quiet suddenly, but then she'll laugh at something and seem like any normal kid." "She looks so much like you," David observed. "It's uncanny." Claire nodded. "I dug up some of your childhood photos. The resemblance is remarkable." "Martha's coming over later to discuss arrangements," Jack said, lowering his voice. "I think she wants to take Sophie back." Claire frowned. "Do you want that?" Jack stared into his wineglass. A week ago, I didn't even know I had a daughter. Now I can't imagine her not being here. He looked up at his sister. Is that crazy? That's being a parent, Claire replied simply. It happens that fast. When Martha arrived after lunch, the girls were in the garden, Emma showing Sophie how to make flower crowns from the daisies that grew along the fence. She seems happy, Martha observed, watching them through the window. She has her moments, Jack said. The nightmares are getting better, but she still cries for Rebecca sometimes. Martha nodded, her expression softening. That won't stop any time soon. Rebecca was her whole world. They settled in Jack's study, the space that had once been devoted entirely to business, now cluttered with children's books, and a small desk Jack had purchased for Sophie's homeschooling. I've been thinking, Martha began carefully. Perhaps it would be best if Sophie came back to live with me. Jack had been expecting this, but it still felt like a blow. Why? You're a busy man, Jack. Your life isn't set up for a child. I'm changing that, Jack countered. I've reduced my hours, hired tutors, rearranged my schedule. For how long? Martha interrupted gently. A few weeks, a few months, until it becomes inconvenient? Sophie has already lost her mother. I don't want her to experience another abandonment when you realize fatherhood doesn't fit your lifestyle. Jack felt a flare of anger. That's not fair. I didn't abandon them. I didn't know. Perhaps not, Martha conceded. But now you do know, and the question is, are you truly prepared to put Sophie first for the next 10 years, to attend school plays instead of board meetings, to handle teenage heartbreaks and homework crises? Before Jack could respond, the study door opened and Sophie peeked in. Dad, Emma's mum says they have to leave now. We'll be right there, Jack replied, noting how naturally Sophie had started calling him Dad. It had taken less than a week for the word to lose its strangeness. After goodbyes were exchanged and Claire's family had departed, Sophie approached Jack with something clutched in her small hand. Emma gave me this, she said, opening her palm to reveal a small silver unicorn charm. She said it's for good luck in my new home. Sophie looked up at Jack, then at Martha. This is my home now, right? The question hung in the air, loaded with meaning. Jack looked to Martha, whose expression had softened. That depends, Martha said carefully. Would you like it to be your home? Sophie considered this with surprising seriousness for an 8-year-old. I miss our apartment and my old room, she admitted, but Daddy is here and he needs me. She turned those perceptive blue eyes to Jack. Right, Daddy? The simple truth of it struck Jack with physical force. He did need her, this unexpected daughter who had arrived in his life precisely when he'd been drowning in grief and solitude. Right, he managed, voice rough with emotion. Martha watched this exchange, something shifting in her expression. I see, she said softly. Later, after Sophie had gone to bed, Martha lingered in the foyer. I'm not giving up on the idea that she might be better off with me, she warned, but I'll give this arrangement some time. Jack nodded, relieved at the temporary reprieve. Thank you. Don't thank me yet, Martha replied. I'll be watching closely. One hint that she's unhappy or neglected, and I'll be filing for custody. After Martha left, Jack wandered into Sophie's room to check on her. She was sleeping peacefully, the unicorn charm placed carefully on her nightstand beside a framed photo of Rebecca. As he turned to leave, his eye caught a small, leather-bound book partially tucked under Sophie's pillow. Curiosity piqued, he gently eased it out, recognizing it as a journal. The cover was embossed with the name Rebecca Miller in faded gold letters. Jack hesitated, torn between respect for privacy and desperate curiosity about the woman who had borne and raised his child. The journal fell open to a page marked with a pressed flower. The entry was dated just 3 months ago. Sophie asked about her father again today. I showed her the pictures, told her the good stories, the true ones, about his brilliant mind and kind heart. I left out the part where he changed his number, where his assistant blocked my calls, where the registered letters were returned unopened. Those aren't Sophie's burdens to carry. Jack closed the journal, hands shaking. He carefully returned it to its place beneath Sophie's pillow, a leaden weight settling in his stomach. What else would he discover about the past he'd so carelessly discarded? The envelope arrived on a Tuesday, 3 weeks after Sophie had come to live with Jack. It bore the return address of Rebecca's lawyer in São Paulo, forwarded through Martha. Inside was a USB drive and a handwritten note on pale blue stationery. Jack, if you're reading this, then Sophie has found you, and I am gone. There are things you should know, things I couldn't tell you before. Everything is explained in the video files. Rebecca. Jack stared at the USB drive, heart pounding. It took him 3 attempts to insert it correctly into his laptop, his hands trembling uncontrollably. The screen filled with Rebecca's face. She was thin, her once vibrant features hollowed by illness, but her dark eyes still held the intelligence and warmth he remembered. She was propped up in what appeared to be a hospital bed, a colourful scarf wrapped around her head where dark curls had once been. "Hello, Jack," she began, her voice raspier than in his memories but still distinctly hers. "This is strange, isn't it? Speaking to you after all these years, knowing that when you hear this, I'll be gone." She smiled wryly. "I always did have a flair for the dramatic." Jack found himself smiling despite the tightness in his chest. "First, let me say that I don't blame you for not knowing about Sophie. Yes, I tried to reach you when I found out I was pregnant. But after those attempts failed, I made a conscious choice to stop trying. Perhaps that was wrong of me, but I was young and hurt and proud." She paused, taking a labored breath. "And truthfully, I was afraid you would reject her, reject us, and I couldn't bear that." Rebecca shifted slightly, wincing with pain. "Sophie has been the light of my life, Jack. She's smart and kind and stubborn, so much like you in ways that have made me laugh and occasionally tear my hair out." Her expression grew serious. "She deserves to know her father, and now that I can no longer protect her from life's hardships, she needs you." The video continued for nearly an hour, Rebecca sharing stories of Sophie's childhood, her likes and dislikes, her fears and dreams. She detailed Sophie's medical history, her school progress, the names of her friends. It was as if she was desperately trying to download 9 years of parenting knowledge in her final days. "I've told her only good things about you," Rebecca confessed toward the end. "Perhaps that was selfish of me, painting you as the successful, brilliant man who never knew about her rather than someone who might have rejected her. But I wanted her to be proud of where she came from, of both her parents." Tears streamed down Jack's face as Rebecca's final message played. "I don't know what kind of man you've become, Jack. The boy I knew in Brazil was ambitious and sometimes careless with feelings, but he had a good heart beneath the drive to succeed. I have to believe that man will do right by our daughter." She smiled, a flash of the old Rebecca shining through her illness. "She's the best of both of us, Jack. Love her, protect her, and perhaps, through her, you can know a piece of me too." The screen went dark, leaving Jack staring at his own reflection, tears tracking down his cheeks. A small sound from the doorway made him turn. Sophie stood there in her pajamas, Mr. Whiskers, the stuffed rabbit, clutched to her chest. "That's Mommy," she said quietly. Jack wiped hastily at his tears. "Yes, she left me a message." Sophie approached cautiously. "She made videos for me too, for my birthdays when she's gone." Her voice was matter-of-fact, the reality of her mother's absence already integrated into her worldview in a way that broke Jack's heart anew. "Would you like to watch this one with me?" Jack offered, opening his arms. Sophie climbed onto his lap, a position that had become increasingly natural over the past weeks. Jack restarted the video, and together they watched Rebecca speak from beyond, her love transcending even death. When it ended, Sophie was quiet for a long moment. "Mommy looks really sick there," That was right before she went to the hospital for the last time. Jack tightened his arms around her. She was very brave. Sophie nodded against his chest. She said the medicine made her sick, but she took it anyway to stay with me as long as possible. She looked up at Jack, her eyes, his eyes, serious. Are you going to get sick too? The question blindsided him. No, sweetheart, I'm not sick. Promise? There was such vulnerability in that single word that Jack felt his heart constrict. I promise I'll do everything I can to stay healthy and take care of you, he said, knowing it was the most honest promise he could make. Sophie seemed to accept this. She settled more comfortably against him, thumb finding its way to her mouth. A regression Jack had noticed happened when she was particularly tired or stressed. Dad? She mumbled around her thumb. Yes? I have a school thing on Friday. It's family day. Grandma Martha was going to come, but... She hesitated. Would you come instead? The quarterly board meeting was on Friday, the most important of the year, where Jack was expected to present the 5-year strategic plan. Rescheduling was unthinkable. I'll be there, he said without hesitation. Sophie's face lit up with a smile so like Rebecca's that it made his breath catch. Really? The whole day? The whole day, Jack confirmed. What time does it start? 9 o'clock. We do presentations about our families and have a picnic lunch and games and stuff. Then I'll be there at 8:30, just to be sure. Later that night, after Sophie was asleep, Jack called his CFO, Andrew. I need you to present the strategic plan at the board meeting, Jack said without preamble. A beat of silence. The board specifically requested you present it, Jack. It's your vision. It's our vision, Jack corrected. And you know it as well as I do. Better, probably. You did most of the financial projections. Is this about your daughter? Andrew asked carefully. The news had spread quickly through the executive team. Family day at her school, Jack confirmed. It's important. Another pause. The board won't be happy. The board will survive, Jack replied. My daughter needs me more than they do right now. As he hung up, Jack realized with startling clarity that for the first time in his adult life, his priorities had fundamentally shifted. The empire he'd built, the success he'd achieved, none of it mattered compared to the trust in Sophie's eyes when she asked if he would be there for her. On Friday morning, Jack sat cross-legged on a primary school classroom floor, surrounded by children and their parents, watching Sophie proudly present a family tree she had created. In the center were 3 photographs: Rebecca, Sophie, and Jack. This is my mom, who's in heaven now, Sophie explained to her classmates with remarkable composure. And this is my dad, who didn't know about me until recently, but now we're a family. She looked directly at Jack. And even though my mom isn't here anymore, she'll always be part of our family too. In that moment, watching his daughter's courage and grace, Jack made a decision. He would fight for custody of Sophie, not just temporary guardianship, but legal recognition as her father with all the rights and responsibilities that entailed. It wouldn't be easy. Martha would oppose him. His work would suffer. His life would change irrevocably. But looking at Sophie, this miraculous child who had his eyes and Rebecca's smile, Jack knew with absolute certainty that she was worth fighting for. Mr. Harrison, this petition for full custody is highly irregular, considering you've known the child for less than 2 months. Judge Winters peered over her reading glasses, skepticism evident. Jack stood straighter, aware of Martha's presence at the opposing table. Yes, Your Honor, Sophie is my biological daughter, confirmed by DNA. I'm her only living parent. Biology isn't everything, the judge replied. Ms. Miller has been a constant presence since birth. You, by admission, didn't know she existed until recently. Through no fault of my own, Jack added. Had I known about Sophie, I would have been involved from the beginning. The judge addressed Martha. You oppose Mr. Harrison's petition? Martha rose, determined. I do. While I don't doubt Mr. Harrison's sincerity now, I question whether his lifestyle can accommodate a child long-term. Sophie needs stability, not a father constantly traveling or working 16-hour days. My schedule has already been adjusted, Jack countered. I've hired appropriate childcare, enrolled Sophie in school, and created a stable home. Judge Winters silenced them with a raised hand. I've read the child services reports. Both homes would be suitable. She fixed Jack with a penetrating stare. What makes you think you're equipped to raise an 8-year-old girl alone? Jack took a deep breath. I'm not equipped, Your Honor. I'm learning every day. But Sophie is my daughter. Rebecca wanted us to know each other. And in our short time together, I've come to love her more than I thought possible. And the child's wishes? Sophie has expressed a desire to live with me, though she's also very attached to her grandmother. Martha nodded in reluctant agreement. This isn't simple, the judge sighed. I'll speak with Sophie privately and order a more thorough evaluation. We'll reconvene in 30 days. Meanwhile, the current arrangement stands. Mr. Harrison retains physical custody, with Ms. Miller having liberal visitation. Outside, Martha approached Jack. This isn't personal. I'm doing what I think is best for Sophie. So am I, Jack replied. Rebecca wanted her to know me. Rebecca didn't know what kind of father you'd be, Martha countered. She hoped for the best, but couldn't know for sure. And you think you do? Jack's temper rose. Martha's eyes flashed. I've watched you with Sophie. You're trying, I'll give you that. But I've seen the calls you take during her bedtime story, how you check your phone during soccer practice. Your world revolves around Harrison Technologies. Old habits die hard. I'm changing, Jack said, more to himself than Martha. For how long? Martha asked. Change is hard, especially when you've spent your entire adult life prioritizing one thing. Sophie bounded up, her school day finished. Dad, Grandma, is everything okay? Are we still going to the Science Museum this weekend? Absolutely, Jack assured her, forcing a smile. Nothing's changed, sweetheart. That night, after Sophie slept, Jack found himself in Elizabeth's closet, surrounded by her things. 3 months since her death, and he still couldn't pack away her clothes. I don't know if I can do this, he whispered. She deserves better than what I can give her. His phone buzzed, a text about an urgent European division issue. Before Sophie, he would have called immediately. Instead, he set the phone aside. Tomorrow would be soon enough. The cream envelope arrived, addressed to the parents, guardians of Sophie Miller Harrison, the hyphenated surname, a recent change. Jack turned it over curiously. The return address showed Westbrook Academy, admissions office. What's this? Jack murmured. Sophie, building a Lego structure at the dining table, glanced up. What's what? Nothing important, Jack replied, sliding the envelope into his pocket. How's your spaceship coming? It's not a spaceship, Dad, Sophie corrected with exaggerated patience. It's a quantum physics laboratory. See the particle accelerator? Jack examined the colorful construction. Of course, silly me, very impressive. Ms. Chen says I have an aptitude for engineering, Sophie informed him seriously. That means I'm good at building things. Just like your old dad, Jack smiled, remembering his own childhood fascination with taking things apart. Later that night, after Sophie slept, Jack opened the envelope. Inside was a formal letter inviting Sophie to apply to Westbrook Academy, an exclusive private school in Connecticut. We have been informed of Sophie's exceptional academic potential, the letter read, and would like to offer her the opportunity to join our Young Scholars program, beginning next semester. Jack frowned. Who had informed them about Sophie? A brochure revealed an idyllic campus, state-of-the-art facilities, and references to a world-class education for tomorrow's leaders. It was an opportunity many parents would leap at. So why did it fill Jack with unease? His phone rang. Martha. "Did you get the letter from Westbrook Academy?" she asked without preamble. "Just opened it," Jack replied. "Did you have something to do with this?" "Of course." Martha sounded pleased. "Rebecca and I always discussed sending Sophie there when she was old enough. My late husband was an alumnus. I pulled some strings, mentioned Sophie's exceptional test scores." "Martha, why didn't you discuss this with me first?" A pause. "I suppose I didn't think you'd object. It's an incredible opportunity. Westbrook graduates go on to Ivy League schools almost without exception." "She's 8 years old," Jack pointed out, "and Westbrook is a boarding school." "A very nurturing one," Martha countered, "and Connecticut isn't that far. We could visit regularly." "I've been considering moving there if Sophie attends," Martha admitted. "My lease is up soon, and there's nothing keeping me here except Sophie." Jack felt tension returning. Their truce had been holding, with Martha spending every other weekend with Sophie and one dinner weekly. This threatened their careful balance. "Sophie is settled here now," Jack said carefully. "She's making friends, adjusting to life without Rebecca. I'm not sure uprooting her again is best." "At least think about it," Martha urged. "Visit the campus with me before dismissing it." "I'll consider it," Jack conceded, "but I won't make decisions without talking to Sophie first." In the next morning, Jack found Sophie at breakfast, already dressed for school. "You're up early," he observed, pouring coffee. Sophie nodded, mouth full of cereal. After swallowing, she said, "I'm presenting my science project today. I wanted to practice once more." "The quantum physics lab?" Jack guessed. "Uh-huh. Ms. Chen said I could bring it if I'm careful." Jack watched her eat. In just 3 months, she'd become so integrated into his life that he could hardly remember the time before her. Her toothbrush next to his, her shoes in the entryway, her drawings on the refrigerator. All these small signs had transformed his house back into a home. "Sophie," he began carefully, "how do you like your school?" She considered the question seriously. "It's okay. I like Ms. Chen a lot, and I have friends now. Lily and Marcus and me are building a robot for the science fair." "Do you ever wish you went to a different school, one with more opportunities?" Sophie tilted her head. "Like what kind of opportunities?" "Advanced classes, special programs for kids who are good at science and math." "Maybe," Sophie said thoughtfully. "But would it be near here? I don't want to leave you and Grandma Martha." The simple statement settled something in Jack's mind. "Just curious," he said lightly. "Ready to go?" "I'll drive you today." "Really? Don't you have that big meeting?" Jack smiled. "It can wait. I want to see this quantum lab in action." "Dad, you promised." Sophie's voice cracked with disappointment, her small face crumpling. "The father-daughter dance is tonight. You said you'd be there." Jack ran a hand through his hair, stress radiating. "I know, sweetheart, and I'm so sorry. The Taiwan deal collapsed, and if we don't salvage it tonight, 200 people could lose their jobs." "But you promised," Sophie repeated, the simple accusation more damning than any adult argument. They stood in the kitchen, Jack still in his suit from the emergency board meeting, Sophie already dressed in the pale blue dress they'd chosen together for her first father-daughter dance. "I'll make it up to you," Jack offered desperately. "We can have our own dance this weekend." "I'll clear my whole schedule." "It won't be the same," Sophie interrupted, tears flowing freely. "Everyone else will have stories and pictures, and I'll be the only one whose dad didn't come. Again." The "again" hit Jack like a physical blow. There had been other disappointments in the 4 months since Sophie arrived. A missed soccer game, a school play he'd arrived at just as the curtain fell, parent-teacher conferences rescheduled twice. "Sophie, sometimes being a grown-up means making really hard choices," Jack tried to explain. "You're choosing your company over me," Sophie said with brutal honesty, "just like Grandma Martha said you would." Before Jack could respond, the doorbell rang. Mrs. Reynolds answered it, and Martha's voice floated in from the foyer. "Is she ready? The dance starts in 30 minutes. Martha appeared in the kitchen doorway, elegant in a simple dress, clearly planning to accompany Sophie as a chaperone. She assessed the situation instantly. Sophie's tears, Jack's harried appearance. "You're not going," she said to Jack. It wasn't a question. "Emergency at work," Jack explained weakly. "I was just telling Sophie. That work comes first," Martha finished, as usual. "That's not fair," Jack protested. "This is a legitimate crisis. People's livelihoods are at stake." Martha turned to Sophie, her voice gentling. "Sweetheart, why don't you finish getting ready? Grandma will take you to the dance, and we'll have a wonderful time." Sophie nodded miserably and trudged from the room, her earlier excitement extinguished. Once she was out of earshot, Martha turned to Jack, all pretense of civility gone. "This is exactly what I feared. You promised her, Jack. Do you have any idea what this dance meant to her? She's been talking about it for weeks." "Of course I know," Jack shot back. "Why do you think I feel terrible? But what was I supposed to do? Let my company collapse?" "You were supposed to delegate," Martha replied. "Isn't that what all those highly paid executives are for? So the almighty CEO can occasionally put his daughter first." The accusation stung because Jack knew there was truth in it. He could have sent Andrew to handle the Taiwan negotiations. It might not have been ideal, but it was possible. "I'm trying, Martha," he said, his anger deflating. "I'm not perfect at this yet." "Sophie doesn't need perfect," Martha replied, softening slightly. "She just needs present and reliable." Later that night, after Sophie left with Martha, Jack stood in his empty kitchen, her words echoing. Was she right? Was he failing at the one job that truly mattered, being Sophie's father? The house felt eerily silent without Sophie's presence. Jack realized he'd grown accustomed to her sounds, humming as she drew pictures, chattering about school, even the occasional tears when she missed her mother. His phone rang, Andrew calling about the Taiwan crisis, but for once, Jack let it go to voicemail. Instead, he walked slowly through the house, seeing it through new eyes. Sophie's presence was everywhere. Her rock collection arranged carefully on a shelf, her artwork on the refrigerator, a half-completed puzzle on the coffee table. In just 4 months, she'd transformed his sterile showcase home into something lived in and warm. He paused at her bedroom door. Unlike the impersonal guest room she'd first occupied, this space now vibrated with personality. Jack had let her choose everything: the lavender paint, the butterfly decals, the bookshelf overflowing with stories and science books. On her nightstand sat 2 framed photographs, one of Rebecca holding newborn Sophie, the other a recent picture of Sophie and Jack at the zoo, both grinning widely, his arm around her shoulders. The sight of that photo made something twist painfully in Jack's chest. His phone rang again, more insistently. With a sigh, Jack answered. "I'll be at the office in 20 minutes, he told Andrew. "Start the conference call without me." "Ladies and gentlemen of the board," Jack began, standing at the head of the long mahogany table where Harrison Technologies' 12 board members watched him expectantly. "I've asked you here to discuss significant changes to the company's leadership structure." Andrew, seated to Jack's right, gave a small nod of encouragement. They'd spent the past week preparing for this moment, anticipating resistance from the more traditional board members. "As you know, I founded Harrison Technologies 20 years ago in my garage," Jack continued. "I've had the privilege of leading this company from a 2-person operation to a global enterprise with over 5,000 employees. It's been my life's work." He paused, making eye contact with each person. "But circumstances in my life have changed dramatically in the past 5 months. I've become a father to a wonderful 8-year-old daughter who needs and deserves my time and attention." Murmurs rippled around the table. Though most knew about Sophie's existence, few understood how profoundly her arrival had changed Jack's priorities. Therefore, effective immediately, I am stepping back from day-to-day operations as CEO. Now the murmurs became exclamations of surprise. Jack raised a hand for silence. I am not leaving the company, he clarified. But I am proposing a restructuring that will allow me to focus on strategic vision and product development, while delegating operational responsibilities to a new Chief Operating Officer. He gestured to Andrew. I am nominating Andrew Chen, our current CFO, to assume this role, with the understanding that he will eventually transition to CEO over the next 18 months. The ensuing discussion was heated, as Jack had expected. Board members expressed concerns about market perception, stock prices, client relationships. Jack addressed each point calmly, presenting the detailed transition plan he and Andrew had developed. This isn't about abandoning the company, Jack explained. It's about creating a sustainable leadership model that doesn't rely solely on me. Frankly, it's something we should have done years ago. Charles Whitman, the most senior board member, leaned forward. Jack, while I sympathize with your personal situation, this company has been built around your vision and leadership. Your name is literally on the building. And it will stay there, Jack replied. But Harrison Technologies has outgrown being a one-man show. We have incredible talent throughout the organization. It's time to leverage that talent more effectively. After 2 hours, the board reluctantly approved Jack's proposal, with the stipulation that he would remain actively involved in major decisions during the transition period. As the meeting adjourned, Charles approached Jack privately. I hope you know what you're doing. This company has been your life. Jack smiled. That's exactly the problem, Charles. It can't be my whole life anymore. Leaving early, Jack headed straight to Sophie's school, arriving just as the final bell rang. He'd promised to pick her up himself today. No driver, no Mrs. Reynolds, and take her for ice cream. Sophie emerged deep in conversation with her friend Lily. When she spotted him waiting, her face lit up with surprise and delight. Dad, you came yourself. I promised, didn't I? Jack replied, warmth spreading through his chest at her reaction. How little it took to make her happy, just his presence, his time. At the ice cream parlor, Sophie happily devoured a chocolate sundae while Jack sipped coffee and gathered his thoughts. Sophie, he began, remember I told you I was making changes at work? She nodded, licking chocolate sauce from her spoon. Well, I did that today. I told the board, the people who help run my company, that I won't be the boss of everything anymore. Sophie's brow furrowed. Did they fire you? Jack laughed. No, sweetheart. I'm still the owner, and I'll still help make big decisions, but I won't be going to the office every day or working such long hours. I'm giving some of my job to other people so I can spend more time with you. Sophie's eyes widened. Really? But you love your job. I do, Jack acknowledged, but I love you more, and being your dad is the most important job I have now. Sophie considered this solemnly. Is this because of the dance? Because I was upset? Jack reached across to take her small hand. Partly. That night made me realize I needed bigger changes, but it's also because I've been thinking about what matters most, and that's you, Sophie. The São Paulo sun beat down as Jack and Sophie emerged from the taxi in front of a modest apartment building in the Pinheiros district. The neighborhood was vibrant and colorful, with small cafes and shops lining the tree-shaded streets. This is it? Sophie asked, clutching Jack's hand. This is where Mom lived with me? This is the address Martha gave us, Jack confirmed, checking his phone. Apartment 3B. They'd been in Brazil for 3 days, staying in a hotel downtown while visiting tourist sites. Today was different. Today they were stepping into Rebecca's past and Sophie's early childhood. A middle-aged woman watering plants on a small balcony noticed them and called down in Portuguese. Jack's grasp of the language was rudimentary, but he caught the question about who they were looking for. "Rebecca Miller," he called back in halting Portuguese. "She lived in 3B. The woman's face transformed with recognition. She disappeared inside, and moments later emerged from the building's front door, wiping her hands on her apron. "You know my Rebecca?" she asked in accented English, studying them both intently. Her eyes widened as she took in Sophie's features. "Meu Deus, Sofinha, is that you, all grown up?" Sophie nodded shyly. "You knew me?" "Knew you, querida. I took care of you when you were a baby. I'm Donna Lucia, your mother's neighbor and friend." Her gaze shifted to Jack, narrowing slightly. "And you are?" "Jack Harrison," he replied, extending his hand. "Sophie's father." Donna Lucia's expression was unreadable as she shook his hand. "Ah, the American businessman. Rebecca spoke of you." Something in her tone suggested those conversations hadn't been entirely positive. Before Jack could respond, she turned back to Sophie with a warm smile. "Come inside. I have cookies just baked, and you must tell me everything about your life now." She led them into the building and up 2 flights of stairs to her apartment, chattering about how Sophie used to toddle down the hallway, how Rebecca would bring her for dinner twice a week, how the whole building had mourned when they moved back to the United States 5 years ago. Jack listened intently, absorbing these details of Sophie and Rebecca's life that he'd never known. He felt a familiar pang of regret for all the years he'd missed. In Donna Lucia's cozy apartment, Sophie quickly warmed up to the older woman, accepting cookies and answering questions about school and her life in America. "And now you live with your pie?" Donna Lucia asked, glancing at Jack. Sophie nodded. "Since Mom died. Before that, I didn't know him." Donna Lucia's expression softened with sympathy. "Your mother was a remarkable woman, Sophia. So brave, so determined. Did you know her well?" Jack asked, seizing the opportunity to learn more about Rebecca's life. "We were close for the years she lived here," Donna Lucia confirmed. "I helped with Sophie when Rebecca needed to work late. Sometimes she would come here in the evenings, and we would talk over coffee while this one played." She patted Sophie's hand affectionately. "What did she do? For work, I mean?" Jack asked, realizing how little he actually knew about Rebecca's life after their brief relationship. "Many things at first. Translation work, English tutoring, whatever she could find to support her child." Donna Lucia's tone carried a hint of accusation. "Later, she got the position at the university, teaching English literature. That was a good job, with benefits for Sophie's healthcare." Jack absorbed this information, imagining Rebecca struggling to make ends meet while raising their daughter alone. The thought made his chest ache with guilt. "I would have helped," he said quietly. "If I had known." Donna Lucia's gaze was piercing. Perhaps, but Rebecca was proud, and after so many unanswered calls. Sophie, examining family photos on a side table, looked up. "Can we see our old apartment, Donna Lucia? Is someone living there now?" The older woman nodded. "Sim, a young couple moved in last year. But perhaps they would let you look quickly. For memory's sake, let me call them." As their plane began its descent into San Francisco, Jack gently woke Sophie. "We're almost home, sweetheart." Sophie blinked sleepily, disoriented after the long flight from Brazil. "Did I sleep the whole way?" "Most of it," Jack smiled. "You missed the mediocre airline pasta." Sophie peered out at the approaching coastline. "I can't wait to tell Grandma Martha everything, and show her all the pictures." "She's meeting us at the airport," Jack reminded her. "She's been taking care of Mr. Whiskers while we were gone." Moi. The 2 weeks in Brazil had transformed their relationship in ways Jack hadn't anticipated. Away from work pressures and familiar routines, he'd been able to focus entirely on Sophie, learning her rhythms, her fears, her joys. They'd followed Rebecca's footsteps through São Paulo, visited her university, met her colleagues and friends. Each place had offered new insights into the woman who had raised their daughter alone. Most significantly, they'd spent 3 days in the coastal town where Rebecca had grown up, staying with her elderly uncle Paulo, her only remaining relative in Brazil. There, Sophie had collected seashells on the same beaches where Rebecca had played as a child, eaten mangoes from the famous market stalls, listened to Paulo's stories about her mother's childhood mischief. "Dad," Sophie's voice pulled Jack from his reverie, "are things going to be different now that we're home?" "How do you mean?" Sophie fidgeted with her seatbelt. "Will you go back to working all the time? Will I see you less?" Jack took her hand. "Some things will be different, but not that. Remember our promise?" They'd made a pact on their last night in Brazil, sitting on the balcony of their hotel room, watching the São Paulo skyline shimmer with lights. "Family first," Sophie recited. "Work second." "That's right," Jack nodded. "I meant it then, and I mean it now. Things won't go back to how they were before." Martha was waiting for them in the arrivals hall, her face lighting up at the sight of Sophie running toward her. "Grandma, we saw dolphins, and I ate fruit you've never heard of. And Uncle Paulo showed me Mum's old treehouse." Martha enveloped Sophie in a hug, laughing at her enthusiasm. "I want to hear everything, my darling, every single detail." Over Sophie's head, Martha met Jack's gaze. "Welcome home. You look different." "Good different or bad different?" Jack asked, accepting her brief hug. "Just different," Martha replied, studying him. "More relaxed, I think. Brazil agreed with you both." At home, after dinner, when Sophie had gone upstairs to unpack her souvenirs, Martha cornered Jack in the kitchen. "How was it, really?" she asked quietly. "Beyond the tourist highlights." Jack leaned against the counter, considering his answer. "Illuminating, difficult at times. I learned a lot about Rebecca, and about myself, honestly." "What kind of things?" Jack hesitated, then decided on honesty. "That I was wrong about her not trying hard enough to reach me. She tried for months, Martha. My assistant blocked her calls. Letters were returned unopened. I was so wrapped up in my business expansion that I effectively cut her out without even realizing it." Martha's expression softened with surprise. "You didn't know that before?" "I suspected, but seeing it in her own words." Jack shook his head. "It changes things." "In what way?" "I've been carrying this idea that she made a choice to keep Sophie from me, but it wasn't like that. She tried, I was unreachable, and eventually she did what she had to do. She moved forward without me." Martha was quiet for a moment, absorbing this. "That sounds like Rebecca. She was never one to keep knocking on a door that wouldn't open." Jack nodded, remembering other revelations from Rebecca's journal, her determination to give Sophie a good life despite limited resources, her refusal to let bitterness color how she spoke of Sophie's absent father, her courage in facing motherhood alone. "There's something else you should know," Jack said, making a decision. "I'm going to formalize our joint guardianship arrangement. Rebecca wanted Sophie to have both of us in her life, and she was right. Sophie needs her grandmother just as much as she needs her father." That night, after Sophie was asleep, Jack found the journal entry she had been reading before they left Brazil. "My dearest Sophie, I know you'll find these words someday, perhaps when I'm no longer here. There's something important I need you to understand. Your father didn't abandon us. He simply never knew about you. That was my choice, made after my attempts to reach him failed. If you're reading this and you found him, please don't judge him harshly for not being part of your early life. And please don't judge me for the decisions I made. We were both young, making the best choices we could with the information we had. What matters now is the future. Your future." Jack closed the journal, tears blurring his vision. Even in her final days, Rebecca had been protecting both of them, absolving him of blame while ensuring Sophie understood the nuanced truth of her parents' story. Dad! Sophie stood in the doorway, pajamas on. Are you reading Mum's journal too? Jack nodded, wiping at his eyes. I was. Your mom was an incredible woman, Sophie. I wish I had known her better. Sophie approached, sitting beside him. She knew you'd be a good dad to me. She told me that all the time. She did? Sophie nodded solemnly. She said you just needed a chance to show it. Jack pulled her into a hug, overwhelmed by the generosity of Rebecca's spirit, the faith she'd maintained despite everything. Your mother was right about many things, he said softly, but especially about how amazing you are. You're the best of both of us, Sophie, and I'm so grateful to be your dad. Even though it was a surprise? Sophie asked, voice muffled against his shoulder. The best surprise of my life, Jack assured her. Sometimes the things we don't plan for turn out to be exactly what we need.